Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are very excited because we are here in Seattle. And what's happening in Seattle these couple of days, Sarah?
The Seattle International Film Festival.
Woohoo!
I feel like
yes.
we need to insert some air horns and fanfare and things right there. It's so exciting. We are at SIFF.
Yes. This is something that I think has been on our list for a while, to be able to go and experience a film festival, go out and support a lot of indie and local film creators, directors, production teams, actors. And we're here in Seattle and we're doing the dang thing, you know? So this is going to be our first of 3 films that we are going to be reviewing that we're seeing here at SIFF. Seattle International Film Festival. So the first of them that we're going to be talking about today is called The Things You Kill. So Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Things You Kill?
Sure. Haunted by the suspicious death of his ailing mother, a university professor coerces his enigmatic gardener to execute a cold-blooded act of vengeance.
All right. And in Movies and Us tradition, we're going to start off with our 1-sentence summaries for The Things You Kill. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, gardening isn't always therapeutic.
Well done. No, it's not. Truly. Okay, my 1-sentence summary is a transformation of Cinderella proportions for a grieving Turkish man by an enigmatic fairy godmother. Gardener.
Indeed, yes. We undergo a very intense change.
Big transformation, indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, well, let's start off by sharing our high-level thoughts, our review, our thoughts, feelings, reactions about The Things You Kill. I would say our thoughts and feelings are quite fresh. It's been less than 24 hours since we've watched this movie, so you're getting the real fresh, hot off the press reactions from both of us. Yeah, Sarah, what are your thoughts about The Things You Kill? This was, might I add, your the one of the films that we were going to see this weekend that you were most excited to see.
Yes, I need to watch this movie again. So we made the mistake of seeing the 9 p.m. showing of this film, and I had gotten about 3 hours of sleep the previous night.
Really?
So I was really
Yeah.
struggling at 9 p.m. I was having a hard time, and I did not have the brain capacity for this movie. So I don't feel as though I have a well-formed opinion of it because I was so damn tired. I struggled. But I like a lot of what this film is doing. I like a lot of the creative choices. The cinematography, I think, is really interesting. And there are some cool choices that they make with the camera that I really enjoyed. And then I think there are a lot of really deep themes that are riddled throughout this film that are really interesting to think about and explore. So I need to see this movie again when I have the brain space to actually take in what this film is doing, because I really wasn't able to appreciate it the first time. But I think that there's a lot of good here. Yeah, my big takeaway is, gosh, I got to see this again.
Love that. Before I share some of my thoughts as well, we have to give a shout out to the fact that Seattle showed up and seems to be showing up for this film festival. At that 9 p.m. showing, we had, I would say, nearly a packed house, maybe 85% full.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard to find seats when you come in, and so many people of all ages showed up as well. We got a lot of folks that were older that were at this 9 p.m. showing that ended at 11:30, I think. And so really just overall the theater going experience is I think a whole topic that we could touch on. But I was so encouraged to see that it was a packed house. I didn't know how many people were going to show up to a lot of these screenings, and it's great. It's great. Seattle's showing out. But yes, 9 p.m. showing is rough. Lucky for us, the next two that we're going to watch are not at 9 p.m. One is, I think, 6 p.m. One is 3:30 p.m. There were some screenings that we were even seeing that were like at midnight, like a midnight showing of some
Mhm.
films, which I think is,
Yeah.
it's must be really thrilling because you're gonna
Yeah.
up late going to see a movie. Wild, wild times. But yeah, I love that your reaction is must see again because there's a lot of meat here.
Yeah, yeah, there definitely is, and I just man, I did not have the capacity to be able to take it in. So that's I'm a little bummed about that because I think that there's so much there that I missed, and I hate that. So
Mm,
I'll just have to
yeah,
watch it again, which I'm not mad
yeah,
at.
yeah. All right. Well, I guess my high level thoughts about this film are that I think it takes so many of the filmmaking components and really does an incredible job showcasing what the craft can do and aligning it to a lot of the plot points, the narrative arc moments and beats, and really nails it. I think there's some really interesting technical things that this film does from a filmmaking perspective that there's certain shots and moments where I was like, that's genius. And then I think the story is really rich. I think the text is really rich. I also just need more time to process it all. But there's a lot thematically here that's really interesting around the shadow selves, our suppressed maybe instincts and desires, generational trauma, the nature of gender roles in Turkish society and society at large. There's literally so much baked into here that I think is really fascinating, and we probably will run out of time talking about them all. But even just in jotting down my notes, I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's this whole thread that is being pulled in this film for that theme that is already baked into like 7 other ones that are in here, and it does it in such an elegant way." So there's a lot to talk about, but this was overall really, really great film, and we're excited to dive in. All right, should we give a spoiler alert?
Yeah, there's a lot to this, so yeah, please don't let it be spoiled.
Yes. All right. So if you haven't seen The Things You Kill yet, we're about to dive in fully and have full free rein to talk about this film. It is a thriller, so I think inherently, like, you really should go in to see this with a white canvas. All right. Where should we go first? What's something that really was exciting, captivating to you about this film?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things is just how like shots were framed in this and just the way that the camera really helps frame a lot of this film. And you
Mm.
can see, like you were mentioning, those filmmaking components that really enhance what the film is trying to do thematically or what these characters are feeling. One of my favorite examples is when our main character Ali, he is sharing something like deeply personal and the camera is out of focus on him, and the way that the camera will play with things being in focus and out of focus, I think, is really
Mm.
intentional and helps highlight some of those many themes that you were just alluding to.
Yeah, yeah. This film and the camera plays so much with what we're hearing and listening to and where our focus might be from different senses. And then sometimes what we're hearing and seeing are not congruent, and we're actually able to take in more because of that. One of the scenes and moments that really stood out to me is right after his mother's death. There's a wide shot of the family in the living room, and obviously tensions are rising. I love that we don't cut away from that wide shot. We kind of feel stuck there. So that's kind of a genius editing move. It's like it's a long wide shot, and I kind of wanted to cut away and get to something else and be distracted by some of the cuts, but we just have to sit in the emotions of that moment. But then there's that scene ends with a shot focused on Ali, and we hear his father getting really riled up in the background. And you hear other family members trying to calm him down, and you hear him getting angrier and angrier, and they're having this really tense interaction between father and son. But we never see the father, and we only focus and are there's this close-up shot of Ali's face as this conversation that's really grating on him and triggering him, is bringing up a lot of emotion, but we never hear the father, and I thought that was such a genius move. It actually adds so much more drama and tension to the moment because I can imagine what the father is probably experiencing and expressing, and you almost hear like shuffling in the background too of the family members trying to hold him back. And I thought that was such a tense moment and really is an example of the way that the technical filmmaking aspects really are aligned to the emotions of the story, the emotions of the moment, and really heighten them. So that was one of my favorite moments. And when that scene was happening, I was like, man, we got to talk about this one. I love what they did here.
Yeah, that was such a great scene, and I love how that keeps the focus on Ali because he is the main character of this film. You know, obviously his relationship with his father is a very pivotal aspect of this film, but that relationship and how our understanding of that relationship evolves over time helps us to better understand Ali and who he is. And I feel like
Mm.
that's what this film is really trying to unpack. So I think that that choice for the camera to remain fixed on Ali is so smart in furthering that goal. You know, this isn't a family drama. This is an exploration of this man, and all of these other things affect him and
Yeah.
affect who he is. But I think all of those really intentional choices, like you were saying, when the cinematography and the audio seem to be a mismatch, all of those choices I think are really, really smart in keeping us focused on what the film is most focused on.
Hmm. And we see that scene, that moment introduces really one of the primary like foundations of the one of the core relationships that fuels so much of the plot throughout the rest of the story. So that scene landing as strong as it does helps us understand why this character makes some of the really big choices later on. I think one of the other themes that was really captivating to me that I was surprised by and loved that the director added so many smaller moments, but it's really a clear through line is just the impact on women in this world and the way that we for a while see the relationship between Ali and his sisters and Ali with his wife and Ali with his mother and seeing how much they're having to absorb and bear the burdens of a lot of the like familial brokenness. But there's a line that one of the female characters, I think it's one of his sisters, says something along the lines of women bear the unseen agonies. And I thought that came at the right time because we had experienced so much of that up until this point. So they're not explaining things to us. We've actually felt that. But it's also a moment where she's speaking this and telling him too. And he is now becoming aware of this dynamic. But I thought that was something that the story is so focused on this like father-son dynamic. And it really is the center point of the whole trajectory. But all of the women around in their orbit are very much given center stage as well. And I just loved that because it's so many of these stories that focus on father-son dynamics can center that so fully that we maybe miss those outer ripple effects of it. But this film gives full stage to a lot of the impacts on women and conversations that our main characters have with the women in his life. So that was really, really great.
Yeah, and they all play such an important role too. You know, I really appreciate that we get to spend so much time with Ollie and his mom too. And, you know, you get to see how much he cares for her, and he's so like tender to her and just wants to make sure that she is taken care of and she is okay. And that is almost our introduction to Ali as a character is through him caring with his mom or caring for his mom. And I thought that that was so smart, but then over the course of the film, we learn some of the ways that that care might be a byproduct of like him being away for so many years. And so now needing to almost like make up for that time away or, you know, I don't know, like all of these other feelings that might then be influencing his tenderness and his care for his mom. And I like the way that the film reframes those things and you'll see something and you'll kind of form an opinion and then over time it'll show us maybe a different viewpoint or a different perspective of that relationship or of that thing. So I thought that that was really smart, and it also highlights, you know, those gender dynamics that you were touching on
Mm.
of his mom needs to be bathed and she can't do that for herself, but she doesn't want her son to do it. She wants to wait till one of her daughters can come, but that's
Yep.
not going to be for like a day or two. And the way that Ali has to almost fight to care for his mom. And I thought that that was really interesting. Little scenes like that show up throughout, just exposing what is the quote unquote women's role and what is the quote unquote men's role. And I like the way that this film is kind of playing with those things throughout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, very much so. And you see how much the women are having to bear so much out of care, out of protection for the men in their life. I love the conversation that he has with his sister, where the sister reveals a big, big thing that happened between his mom and his dad. And he's angry, I understandably, because he's like, why didn't you tell me? And all this stuff. And I wish I would have known. But she's absorbed so much of that herself so that she could protect him, so that she could protect her mother as well. So I love that a lot of what the women are having to bear and absorb is out of desire to care for and protect the people in their life. Even his mother not wanting him to know as well, and his mom making his sister swear not to tell him, is out of care for him so that he can live and pursue maybe a better life for his career in America and not feel like there's these ties back home. And I thought that was really fascinating. And a lot of those dynamics between him and his father, and some of the feelings of guilt, and then perhaps the frustrations that both the father and the son feel, showcases a lot of, I think, the challenges of like generational progress, but also the ways that can be complicated with the responsibilities that you need to take care of, or the gaps that you feel between your new life, but then where you came from. And you see that in the settings that he inhabits. So the contrast between his home that he's built with his wife and the things that he wears, the crisp white button up and the khakis. And then when he goes back home, you can feel that there's such poverty that they've experienced and they're struggling. And kind of that code switching that he has to figure out how to do between his working life as a professor at university. It's a moment of progress for the next generation, but then there's also all these complicated feelings of guilt and that how to bridge that gap and that delta. And you see that the father feels frustrated by those things too, feeling like, oh, you think you're better than me now just because you went off to America. All those complicated feelings I think are so real. Really hit home for me with my parents who are immigrants to the US from China, and a lot of their parents still being home in their home country and feeling that same divide and that same feeling of responsibility and wanting to care for the older generation, but then also that being sometimes in tension with building that new life and pursuing wholeheartedly the new things, and all of the complicated feelings of guilt and progress and this is what it was all for, but then also there's costs to be and implications from it too. I think all of that is so nuanced in how it's portrayed in this film. So that's a like emotional thread line that I think really struck home and struck a chord with me too.
And I love that the film also explores the ways in which Ollie's dad tried to protect him as well. There's that one little scene where I guess it's Ollie's aunt is talking about the way that their dad beat them and the way that their dad was violent and not a good man, which doesn't match up with Ali's experience. And so I love that aspect too. Like obviously Ali's dad is not a good dude, but we see the ways in which he is trying and that like attempt to do better and do what you can. And I also like that the film is exploring the fact that like no person is one thing either,
Yeah.
Ali's granddad isn't just, this violent man, just like Ali's dad is not just a violent man. And Ali isn't just a professor, he's so much more. And so I think that the film really effectively explores how we are more than one thing. And like you were talking about the code switching, how people have to switch who they are in different circumstances. some have to feel the pressure to do it more than others, obviously, but the way that we see Ali changing and the way that he is comfortable at home and himself, the way that he has to be on and professional at work, the way that he kind of reverts a little bit when he goes back home, like we see all
Yeah.
of these different sides of him, and all of that is part of who he is. And
Hmm.
I think the film does a really good job of showing kind of that universal truth through this one very specific story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. And speaking of kind of like, especially the opening and kind of establishing that concept of the complexities of all of us as human beings, I really appreciated that as we're getting to know who this character is at the beginning, which he's a mystery to us in a lot of ways. We see little moments and vignettes of him, and that's all we have to kind of gather who is this person that we're about to follow. And I appreciate that we get to see his tenderness with his mother and how much care he places in her and how much he's providing for her and whatnot. But he's also really not perfect. Like he's really dismissive with his wife, and he's kind of a hard ass on the student in the classroom. And so I love that he isn't painted to be this like righteous son who is successful and then going back and caring and being a provider for his family. He's not a simple protagonist by any means. And we learn that very much throughout the second half of the movie, where we see almost that fantasy, this taking on of a new self, and it being suggestive of maybe those instincts and desires that aren't able to be expressed because they're being suppressed by all of the circumstances. Like he is a complex man. And even by the end of the film, I love that we still maybe don't really know how to place him. And there's still a lot of mystery about who he is and what he's capable of that's still left as open questions by the end of the movie. That's really cool. And sometimes I think we meet protagonists in films that are kind of archetypes and we can kind of place them and they're painted one way, but he's so complex and multifaceted. And honestly, by the end of the movie, I'm like, I still don't know who he is and what he's capable of. And that's really fun. That's really exciting. And I think says so much about all of what you just shared about, like, we can't place people into buckets. They're so complex and multifaceted and sometimes conflicting, contrasting dimensions of them that come together and don't really make that much sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We do not fit into nice, clean, tidy little boxes, and we
Nope.
like it when our characters also don't fit into the nice, clean little boxes.
Yeah.
And again, I was so tired, so I probably missed a lot, but one of the
You're a
things that
champ, honestly, for surviving
oh my God,
that whole
I
experience.
was I was big struggling. Like I almost got up and just like stood in the back because I was like, oh my gosh, I am so tired. But I did
We
it.
also
I
just
made it
had
through.
like big, juicy, like Nashville hot chicken sandwiches that are like sitting
It
at the
was
bottom of her
so
stomach.
good.
So I'm sure that didn't help of just like all of the brain cells and blood flow going to the stomach.
Mhm.
So, it tasted great, but we
It
we
was
had some
great. Highly
implications to
recommend.
manage after.
Yes. But so I may have missed something, but like one of my I don't know. I guess I'm going to call it a nit. One of my
Okay.
nits
Yeah.
about this film is I almost wish that it had gone further with some of the more like surreal elements.
Yeah.
It was almost too subtle for me and it left me confused, but I may have
Mm,
missed something. So I think I wanted it to lean into like let's not to the degree of Fight Club, but like let's be like Fight
mm,
Club and be like so
crazy.
over the top, or like
Yeah.
Bardo, which I loved and you didn't, which is
Yes.
so surreal and over the top. Like I almost wanted that level of bigness
Yeah.
because it was obviously surreal. We're playing with these like different versions of yourself kind of thing, but it was almost normal enough that I was like, wait, is this happening? Is this not happening? What's going on? So I think I would have liked a little bit of bigness there, a little bit more wild and in your face, as opposed to just how subtle it is. But I think that's really like my one complaint about this film. I think everything else lands so well, and I love how many like themes are woven together. But yeah, I was really confused. Because I was like, what is going on?
I was too. And I thought that I might have just missed something as well. I was like, did I miss that one key scene that explained what the
Mhm.
hell is
Yeah.
happening? Okay, so I'm glad. I mean, maybe we both missed it too, you know? This is like data points of
Yeah.
2.
I'm not a
So
good
I think that's
person
enough
to
to
ask.
confirm.
We have a poor sample size because
Yeah,
I'm not a good person to judge it off of. So that's why I'm like, I need to watch it again because like
see
was
where it
the
happened.
big reveal or was the scene, was it just more subtle than I was expecting and I missed it because I didn't have the brain capacity? Like
Yeah,
there had to have been something, but
right?
I don't know. I was big confused.
The one moment that I think I remember while watching feeling like, wow, that's really interesting. But I think that that was meant to be the like, the shift in something is not as it seems moment. My theory is I think about at the halfway point, Reza the gardener shows up and there's this shot of him walking up in the mirror and it stays on the mirror and then the camera moves. It's some like typical filmmaking genius in the cinematography, but the camera moves as if we're still in the mirror, but then actually there's a cognitive dissonance that happens because we are now actually filming what's happening. We are not in the camera. And so that was the one like surrealist-esque wafting moment that I remember thinking, "Oh, that's interesting," which then I think paints a really interesting lens on the whole second half of the movie, which is none of this might actually be really happening and it's this fantasy and him playing out, man, what would I be like if I was my most unafraid, bold, unsuppressed self and could freely just express it all. And Reza represents so much of that. He's brash, he's bold, he shows up, but he's unafraid to take up space. And I think that's the like point of no return. Things are not as they seem one moment. And you're right, I was thinking a lot about Bardo because Bardo has a moment like that, but then it ratchets it up the intensity of that over time. And this movie's a lot more subtle in its ways of doing that. That's the one moment where I was like, huh, that's probably the key to understanding this movie. And I was trying to figure it out too as it was folding. So I was also confused.
Yeah, I think you're spot on though. I think that is the moment, the mirror moment. So that's why I want to watch it again because it's so subtle that you could miss it.
Yep.
And I really did. So I get to
Yep.
watch this again and pay attention to all those because there's a few times that the film returns to that mirror and I love the use of the mirror, but now knowing where the movie goes, I'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to like pick out those little bits of meaning that I missed the first time.
Yep. Yep. That's so true. That's so true. We have to talk about, I guess, the interesting detail that is the main character that we've been following for most of this film. His name is Ali. The gardener's name is Reza. And the director's full first name is Ali Reza. So there's clearly this implication, this, I don't even think it's a suggestion at this point. I think it's just like a, here's what it is, of these being all parts of who this man is. And it's all a part of him. Perhaps what gets expressed is this side of him, but it's all him. And it just made me think a lot about this idea that I think is being explored a lot in media, both TV, movies, television, storytelling in general around like the multiverse and all of the different versions of ourselves, all of these threads that exist and perhaps based on circumstances, some of those threads of what makes us who we are get pulled and some of them don't. You know, Severance is a great example of like all these sides of ourselves that have room to express versus don't. Everything Everywhere All at Once. I was even thinking about Hitman, which is maybe a silly comparison, but it still plays with this concept of he starts the movie as this one version of him that's timid and shy and kind of like a hermit. And by playing this other character, it actually draws out these other sides of him that are still very much a part of who he is. And so there seems to be this concept that we're fascinated by around all of the strands of you that are expressed in this lifetime and all the ones that are not expressed in this lifetime, but maybe still exist. And that's really interesting. Why are we captivated by that? I think we have for like all of all of time, but there seems to be an intensifying of how much we like to tell these kind of stories these days.
Yeah. And I love that the director named these two characters the two parts of his name, like that's just a fun little Easter egg, I think, of emphasizing the meaning and kind of the thesis of this film and using his name to do it. I think is really creative and really interesting. But yeah, it's fascinating to see all of these different takes on this storyline. I mean, like Dr. Jekyll and or yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is such a good example of it, and we see those same kind of archetypes in this film as well. And so we've just always been captivated by the like what ifs and what I don't know, what would we be like if things were different, and just imagining these other selves. It's such an interesting thing that we do as humans, and stretching back centuries, different cultures, it's something that there's something very human about that. And I like that this film emphasizes the humanity of all of these characters and really creates empathy for a lot of them, I think, as the film is exploring all of these different sides of these people, and seeing the good and the bad, but there's still, I don't know, there's still something very, very human and very empathetic about it, which is interesting because this is a thriller. And still, though, it's so focused on Ali and what it means to be human and how we show up in the world.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because I think it's interesting. It's framed to be a thriller, and I was almost like in my seat waiting to be nervous, terrified, adrenaline pumping through my veins, And I love that it doesn't come. Like, while this is thrilling, I would argue that, like, it's so focused on the characters and the humans that it it's interesting to, like, market it or, like, call it a thriller. I mean, everyone will argue what even is a genre anyway, we don't know. But I think it's the woman who introduced the film, kind of the MC of before the screening started, she called it a humanist thriller, which I've just been, like, thinking about that because when she said it, I was like, fascinating collection of words together and, like, so much to unpack there. But after watching this movie, I can kind of see and understand it's taking these moments that are really adrenaline inducing, but there's not a whole lot of, like, major huge violence in this movie. It's quite tame within the world and realm of what thrillers are and our understanding of it. And so that was kind of a fascinating subversion of my expectations because I don't do well with a lot of, like, violence and gore and stuff on screen, and I was waiting for it and it doesn't really come, and I kind of love that. I kept waiting.
And any violence that happens off screen too, which I
Yes.
think is really smart. And so, like we talked about earlier with the family grieving scene and how it's just focused on Ali the entire time, that's what it does later too, in
Mm.
probably the most violent moment with,
With the burial? The
with the
digging?
burial. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that because I think
Mhm.
sometimes when things, especially violent things, happen off screen, like our imaginations are sometimes worse than
Yeah.
seeing the actual visuals. And so that makes things more terrifying, or can makes things more horrifying too, to imagine it and only be hearing it. Like it hits you so differently. So I think the way that this film plays with all of those technical elements helps to infuse like that thrilling part of a thriller in maybe a different way than we would normally expect.
Yeah, that's good. And in fact, we don't sometimes even see it off screen. We just cut away and we're left to, like, imagine all the steps that went down from there as we're, like, moving on to the next thing. And so, yeah, that scene in particular, we hear so much as he's digging, and then there's kind of this big interaction, this big confrontation, and then we cut and we're back at the home in the nature area in the mountains. Yeah, very
Mhm.
fascinating. Very
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's wild.
Mhm. Mhm. Other big things in The Things You Kill that really stuck out to you, whether it's thematically or even from a technical perspective, things that were like, wow, that was really great.
Yeah, I was really interested in what Ali is teaching at the college, and they're
Mm,
talking about translation, and they give like different definitions of what translation means. And
mm,
one of the translations that is offered is carrying something from one point to another. And
mm,
I think that that's really a beautiful way to think about translation. You know,
mm,
it's not like, and I mean, I'm not a translator, but it's not like word to word, but you are carrying one thing to another. You are carrying one idea to the next, and it just makes it something bigger and makes it, I think, more beautiful than this idea of like, I am just substituting one word for another. Like, that's obviously not what translation is. So I loved that framing. And then, especially when we're thinking about the larger themes of this film and like what it means to be human and our complexity and code
mm,
switching and all of these things, like, I feel like that ties in so well into this and the way that, you know, Ali is carried from one scene to another, from one place to another, from one version of himself to another. So I
mm,
think that it's interesting from like a literal translation perspective, but then I think it becomes even more interesting when we think about that in the context of what it means to be human.
mm. Yeah, that's really good. And it's such a fascinating like meditation on like his journey over the course of the film too, as he is exploring or perhaps imagining these other versions of himself and what that person would do. And the interesting thing about translation too is that the root, the ultimate meaning is the same, but it's expressed so differently and in different contexts. And so thinking about him as being translated into all of these different versions of himself is really fascinating. The other interesting like phrase or definition that he describes his translation is this concept of like killing the original thing in order to give life to the next thing, which is a less beautiful, more violent version of what you just said, and the thing that you just teed out around carrying things from one to the next. But that's something that I was like, in the context of this movie is fascinating, is how much of his previous version of himself is he saying he's gonna leave there in order to embrace this new version of him or these new instincts that he has and exploring what that looks like. So the both the beauty of the word and then also the like savagery of the word is also something that he includes in his little mini TED talk about the origins of the word translate, which I think is all part of this movie, you know? There's there's a breaking free, a catharsis out of suppression because you feel how much he's carrying and being, like, closed in on by all the circumstances of his life, but then also there's cost, and there's things that he's choosing by letting those things free and letting those things come out a little bit more that is part of the process as well. So all of the full picture of that, I think, is on display here.
And I love the way that that theme of like killing one thing so that another thing can live, like, kind of shows up throughout the film. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole film starts with his wife talking about this dream that she had about his dad
Yeah.
saying, kill the light. And then that is obviously like mirrored by the end of the film as well. And then, you know, like literally his mom is killed. But
Mhm.
then we're talking about, you know, like killing off like the different sides of him and all of that. We're talking about all of these like figurative versions of killing as well. And so I thought that that was so notable. Like anytime, because the title of the film is The Things You Kill, every time that word kill would come up, I was so aware of it and thinking about like
Yeah.
how this is another version of something that you just kill off of your life, you know, shedding
Mhm.
this layer of you or getting rid of this way of thinking. And so I love the way that that theme and specifically that word shows up over and over again throughout the film. It
Mm.
kept making me think of the title. I was like, oh, Okay, so we're just collecting little things into our bucket of things that are being killed in Ollie's orbit, some literal and some metaphorical.
Yeah, our little basket of goodies, I suppose. Well,
Yeah, it's
funny little
something.
moment.
Basket of something. Maybe not goodies, I don't know, but
Fun little moment is from our theater going experience. The woman who kind of introduces the film, she has this whole kind of introduction around the themes of the film and some other films that are happening at the festival that you can go see that are in line or in conversation with this movie. It was wonderful. I actually loved that we get a little kind of set of musings from one of the hosts at SIF. And then she ends her whole bit, her whole spiel with right before she's about to press play and all the movie starts, she goes, "We hope you enjoy the things you kill." And I just loved that. It was such a fun little moment. There's like a murmuring of chuckles that happened throughout the crowd. It was great. Shout out to that lady. It was so funny.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah. Okay. Other big themes. Looking through my notes. Man, there's so many great lines in this that just I'm like, I need to go back and think about that one sentence that this character said. The one from his sister I wrote down. Another like quick two that I wanted to mention that I think again usher in so many interesting themes that are all just part of the text. One of them is when one of Ali's students at the university, I think it's his last day, and she's talking about a rumor that he's not going to come back. And she says, "In my country, sometimes rumors are more valuable than the truth." It's something along those lines. I don't remember the exact phrasing because I didn't pull out my phone and write it down in the theater. That would be rude. But it was along that same vein. And I thought, wow, this film is not only commenting on the human condition, but also societal structures and dynamics at play here. And there's kind of a larger set of societal commentary that's also being ushered in by that one little line. And then we can see how that shows up in different places throughout the film, or even the conditions and states that these characters find themselves in that are products of their society. All of that is just, it allows your mind to wander, and your mind doesn't have time because it's on to the next scene, but just so rich in the text. The other one that I wrote down that I thought was so great is they're talking about the dog. They're talking about Ali's dog out in the mountains with Reza, I think the first time that they meet. And they're joking about how the dog is like resentful and hateful and kind of got an attitude. And then Reza says to him, "No one is resentful by nature." And wow, what a gut punch of a line that is, that I thought was so great, and also thematically so aligned with these characters that we're seeing processing through so much of that generational resentment or frustration, and seeing how much they're passing that on to the people in their life as well, and maybe acting out that it's all just products of where they came from, and that's not how we were created, but that's sometimes the cards we were dealt that we have to deal with. So there's just so many great lines like that from scene to scene that I'm like, honestly, you take like a 10-minute snippet and one scene from this movie, and it's that alone is so rich. It doesn't even matter who these characters are, just the conversation and the dynamic that's happening between them is standalone so good. And man, I haven't felt that way about a movie in a while. So that was unique about this film. It's just like every scene, every vignette is meaty.
Yeah, absolutely. This is so well written. There's so much really wonderful dialogue, and we were reading subtitles,
Yeah.
and I think that that's also really impressive
Uh,
for these lines to be so impactful
yeah.
in a different language than they were written in. And again, this film is so focused on translation as well. So like, shout out to the translators and whoever had to
Yeah.
do the subtitles into English and find those words to correctly communicate those things in such a beautiful and impactful way. And so I rarely think about the translators who help us out and
That's so
bring
good.
international film to us
Yeah.
English speakers, but I was definitely thinking about that more while watching. And every time one of those really beautiful lines would show up, I was
Yeah.
like, wow, like I I'm impressed at that ability to capture that beauty in a different language. Yeah.
And the humor. And the
And the
humor. Can we talk about that
humor.
for a
It
second?
was funny
This movie's
too.
so funny. It's funny in like It's like none of the scenes are lighthearted at all in this movie, but it's witty. Like a lot of the like little remarks, little comments from the characters were hilarious, and that was an unexpected surprise in this humanist thriller.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our theater loved it. Like we
Oh
got
yeah.
people gave big laughs. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling this.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Another, I guess, like quick shout out to our theater and our audience. The final shot after we hear the boom, boom, boom of the second knock of what's supposed to be like the ghost of his father or the guilt that will be knocking on his door for the rest of his life, whatever, however you want to interpret that moment. There's a long cut to black shot that lasts a long time. And I loved that everyone in our theater was so silent. Like it's almost like everyone was like waiting for is anything coming next, or let's just we no one make a sound, okay? Because this is a moment right now, and we're sitting with the emotions of what we just experienced. And I was shocked. Our theater was dead quiet during that. So shout out to the 9 p.m. Friday night, the Things You Kill crowd, because that was pretty cool. There's not a single cough, not a breath was taken, okay? We just could experience that fully and authentically for, I think, what the filmmakers intended. That was pretty cool. So well done, everybody.
Yep, yep. It was that collective, like, holding your breath. It was really cool.
In a packed theater. It's really cool.
Yeah. And what a way to end the film, too.
Yeah.
You know, on this, like, collective, like, oh, what is going to happen next?
Yeah.
And then it just ends.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also a really bold choice, and it's still satisfying, even though there is that, like, we don't know what happens, but we went, I feel, on enough of a journey with Ali that that ending is appropriate and feels as though you did do something. We did go on a journey. We explored all of these different sides of him, and we got to see the slice of his life that we needed to, and that was it. Now we're done.
Yep. And it cuts off at such an interesting point, too, because it almost feels like the character hasn't fully realized the implications of what he'd done or what he imagined in his mind and fantasized about doing. Like, he's not, it's the feeling in the moment is so fresh. And we have that feeling, too, of like, man, the life that this character is going to live out is so unknown to us. And what he will choose to do next. Will he continue to lean into this side of himself, or will that guilt, that conviction, that moral dilemma bring him to a different path? Like, we don't know. And usually we know at the end of a film. We have a trajectory we think that the character is going to go on. But with this one, I'm like, he's at a crossroads, and we don't know. And to sit with that feeling of what will this character become was really fascinating, and allowing us to have enough time for that in that long, silent black shot was really cool. So that was neat. Great ending.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely packs a punch.
Okay, any other last quick things before we wrap on big things we want to touch on?
Yeah, I think just something very quickly kind of related to what we talked about earlier, where we were talking about like the women in this film.
Yeah.
But I think this film also really highlights, like different forms of masculinity as well. And I found that really interesting, the way that the film explores that in, again, as Ollie is like trying on all of these different versions of himself. I think that there's also that thread of, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? How should you show up in the world? And I thought that it did it in it's a nuanced way of looking at that theme that we've seen a lot of films explore in maybe less nuanced ways. So I appreciate how that theme is so prevalent in here, but it's also not dominating as he is just going through all of these just wild experiences that he's going through. So I appreciated the way that was handled. It's very clear in the text, but it's also not overpowering, which is nice.
Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, the film is so empathetic for the characters in some of the ways that they're exploring these, sometimes in great ways, sometimes in really unhealthy ways, because everything that we see, we can see how it inherits from Pharrell Lee, from his family and from his generational line and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes we see like these unhealthy versions of masculinity, and the film is often portraying that as such an indictment of that and so critical of that, which yes, that's very good. But also it comes from somewhere. And I think that that's something that's really woven into this film, is that it's so empathetic and understanding of you really are a product of so much of your environment, and you have choices to make, but also it's hard sometimes, and the ability to showcase all of the costs of that unhealthy version of masculinity, but also allowing for the empathy to come flooding in as well at the same time, I think is what this film nails. So I love that you brought up that point, because it does both. And sometimes films do maybe a little bit one way or the other, and it leans a little too heavily. So good. So good.
Yeah.
I have one quick shout out that I wanted to give for this film. Opening scene, this opening punch in long shot of through the window, we're hearing Ali and his wife have this conversation. The fact, first of all, that it's through a window is genius, because I felt like I was listening in on a conversation that I shouldn't be, which made me lean in even more, because I'm like, oh, what juicy private conversation is happening. And so there's so much that's revealing about each of their characters, but also really allowing us to like enter into this world of this movie as it starts to unfold. But that shot is so long, it's so still, it's so slow. And then my biggest shout out was really for the audio editing and the audio mixing of that scene, because we can hear their voices getting louder and a little bit more crisp with every millimeter that we get a little bit closer. And by the time we end that shot, we can almost hear their voices like right in our ear. And then that change in contrast and that mirroring the visuals of us leaning in and getting closer, I thought was just really good. So that such a strong opening. I was like, oh, we're in for a treat with this movie. They know how to use every ingredient in the filmmaking toolkit to its full advantage. So that was really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the cinematography in this film is just outstanding. Like,
Yeah.
I was really blown away by some of the shots and the way that the camera is used so well to communicate so much to us as the audience. I also loved the set design, especially in that opening. Like, there's so much to look at in that room as we are slowly panning through it toward the window. And I love the way that was staged, and that home, like the way that it's decorated and all of the items that you see help us paint a picture of who these two individuals are as they're talking about this dream that she had, which I thought was also a brilliant way to start it. So yeah, I agree. Just absolutely a strong opening as we meet these characters, and we're learning so much about them through all of those sensory inputs that are going on. And it's a brilliant way to just drop us into this world.
So good. So good. What a strong start to our SIFF experience, right? Like we got such a treat, an incredible film, really amazing to see so many people that are loving and the audience seemed to really like eat up this film as well. So that was really encouraging to see. Yeah, this was our review and discussion of The Things You Kill. I think we probably need to like look up and see all of the ways that maybe you can experience this, if not in your upcoming film festivals, if it's getting picked up and showing there, but maybe as it gets a hopefully wider or some distribution plan for it. I think we'll have to share more about that. But if you see The Things You Kill somewhere near you or in your upcoming local festivals regionally, definitely check it out. This was amazing. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know if The Things You Kill is coming near you or if you've seen it in some of your festival circuits. Let us know your thoughts about it. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies and Us and our other podcast, TV and Us. We will be back next week for a brief break from perhaps our Sith coverage for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. We eat a full, well-balanced, diverse diet out here, you know? So we hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see y'all again very soon.